Welcome to the stream, Printf. Thank you for sitting down with me. I've been really excited about this. We've been interacting a lot since you've been coaching me, right? But it's always like kind of business mode because I want to get the most out of your time that I can. So I'm like, okay, let me like learn as much as I can, like no chit chat. And then it's also like it's a lot kind of focused on me and on the learning and stuff. So I'm really excited to do this because there's so much about your approach to the game and your mindset and all that kind of stuff that I find interesting. This is getting very long-winded, so welcome to the stream.
All right, thank you.
Okay, let's jump right in because I've got my notes. I think for this interview are the longest they've ever been. So I wanna get as many of these as I can, respecting, of course, that you've already been live for 4 hours before this.
Yeah,
So,
that's fine. I just took my glasses off there because it's like reflected and it's very obvious reflection. So
sure.
probably look better now.
Well, I mean, mine chroma key out, so it's all fair game. All right, so let's just do the basic obvious one, right? Like, how did you pick up StarCraft 2? How did you get into it to begin with?
So I've been playing RTS games for as long as I can remember. There are pictures of me when I was like 2 or 3 or something with my hand on a mouse. I started with like Age of Empires, I guess 2. I don't know if I ever played 1, but at least 2. And I spent most of my childhood playing Age Mythology. It was a great game. I also played like Rise of Nations and some various other ones. I never played StarCraft 1 though until I moved down to the US from Canada. My best friend at the time's mom got us both StarCraft 1 so we could play that over the internet with each other. And so that was when I got StarCraft. So I was like 10 or 11 or something at that point. And we pretty much played mostly UMS. I struggled with the AI, which the StarCraft 1 AI is not amazing. So that gives you an idea of my skill level. At this point, I thought that having a lot of resources in the bank was a good thing. It's like, because you have more money, right? That's
Yeah,
great.
standard stuff for those of us who are new.
Yeah, so I was really bad. And then StarCraft 2 was announced, and because I was playing StarCraft 1, of course, I was excited for that. I was excited for all the UMS or arcade stuff they were showing with like, first-person shooter stuff and having like an Ultralisk walk around with a whole bunch of spine crawlers on his back. I remember they had that in one of the videos. So I got the Wings of Liberty beta, and I played that for a little bit, and then I stopped playing StarCraft actually for a while and went back to Age Mythology and then Supreme Commander. And then sometime in HOTS, I guess I came back, and that was when I really got into StarCraft.
Nice. Interesting. Yeah, that's it's funny. Everybody that I've kind of talked to so far has that kind of story where it's like, oh yeah, like so I'm really interested in kind of the younger crowd, right? Like how did people come to StarCraft, right? Because it seems like not as many people do. Um and it's always a story like that where it's like, oh yeah, somebody gave me the game or like, older sibling, that kind of thing. So it's interesting that yours somewhat kind of maps onto that narrative too. Okay, so next kind of little softball question to get us warmed up. So you're a partnered streamer on Twitch. How long have you been streaming?
I've been streaming since fall of 2013.
Okay, so that is a very long time. What made you decide to start initially?
Uh, so before I started streaming, I attempted to cast StarCraft replays on YouTube with a friend from
Hmm.
high school, and that went abysmally. Went really poorly. So then we decided to try Let's Plays instead. So we
Hmm.
played I Want to Be the Boshi until he rage quit it. And then we decided to race each other in the Wings of Liberty campaign. This was back when we were still both awful at the game.
Hmm.
And then he kind of quit on that, and I decided that live streaming was the future rather than video. So I
Hmm.
decided to try Twitch instead.
Nice. Okay. Was it like a smooth kind of startup for you, or do you feel like it was kind of rocky getting used to live streaming?
Uh, in what way?
So when I look at my own stream, right, like I've got, YouTube VODs and highlights and stuff saved from like when it was, there's no reality blocker and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm like, oh man, they're like, I thought my audio was good. I even made a guide about it, and like it was really bad. I had the settings all wrong. there's just stuff I look back and like, oh, I really wasn't good at it then. And I'll probably feel that way about today, right? My glasses chroma key and stuff.
So it was really bad when I was making the YouTube videos. Some of them are actually still around, and you can go back and listen to my horrendous mic quality. It's actually a little bit painful to listen to how bad the mic was.
Hmm.
And at some point during the creation of the YouTube videos, I got a better mic that was tolerable to use. So that at least some of those technical problems were already solved by this point, by the time I started streaming. I didn't get a camera until several years into streaming, but I did have a mic the entire time that was at least functional.
Hmm.
I followed Nova War's advice on how to configure OBS, because Nova War knows all the tech stuff about streaming. So
Sure.
I like carbon copied what he did for that and didn't have any problems with it.
Nice. Okay. Sounds like it's a little bit smoother for you just because of all of the background stuff that you've been doing before. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's talk in-game stuff, right? Have so I actually don't. I feel like I should know this, but I don't. Have you always been Cannon Rush only, or did you come to that partway through?
No, so I used to be the asshole who builds simulators all over the map when my opponent Cannon Rushes me. Actually, no. Cannon Rush was the only one I respected. It was every other cheese that I didn't like.
Mm.
Like, if someone two-gated me, I was like, no, screw you. I'm building simulators everywhere and installing the game as long as possible because I was an asshole and an idiot. Thankfully, those days are gone. But Cannon Rushing was the one that I always respected because it's the only one that actually requires skill of the actual cheeses. Like, Proxy 4-racks, you build some barracks, hope he doesn't scout, and then you A-move with the Marines. Proxy 2-gate Zealot, same thing. You build a couple gateways, hope he doesn't see it, and then you just send some Zealots and just base him in the game. Cannon Rush, you have to actually play well to win. So that was the only one that I respected back then. And despite that, because I understood the hatred for cheese, I never actually Cannon Rushed on ladder. I would only do it against my friends in custom games. And so on ladder, I was a macro player, doing all the honorable macro things.
For how long? When did the switch happen?
So in the summer of 2013, well, actually, okay. So before that, I would every season I would play my placement matches and get placed into silver because of MMRBK, and then I would play enough games to get promoted back up to Platinum League, and then I would not play for the rest of the season. That was what I did, and then in the summer of 2013, Leg TV, there were community tournaments run by just viewers of Leg TV. The Nova War and Maximus Black had nothing to do with it. But there was a Plat Diamond tournament that they ran. And so I played in that. And I beat Ketrock with a Cannon Rush game 1 in the semifinals. And then I won game 2 with a DT Rush. No, sorry, I lost game 2 to like a 3 racks. And game 3, I rushed DTs and held positioned them on my ramp to blind counter as 3 racks. And so I won that way by then doing like a macro transition to beat his Mass Raven. And then the finals, it was against a Zerg, and I Cannon Rushed into like Mass Carrier or something. And I won that. The semifinals was the hard one because at that point Ketrick was like basically a Masters player anyway. So him playing in a Plat Diamond tournament shouldn't have been fair, but I won it anyway as a Platinum player. And that kind of gave me an idea of like how much better I was at Cannon Rushing the macro. Well, I wasn't actually that much better at it at that point, but so that was like the first tournament or anything that I ever won. And shortly after that, I started streaming because I decided I'd seen the A9 daily on Galsy, and Galsy was like, beating all these pros and stuff, and I lost that, and I said to myself, that doesn't look too hard, I can do that. And I mean, I wasn't good enough to do that at this time, of course, but
yeah,
Galsy wasn't. If you go back and watch that daily, nothing Galsy does is impressive.
Hmm.
It's actually not. Like by modern day standards, it's
Mm-hmm.
truly unimpressive stuff.
Huh.
But back then, it was revolutionary
Mm-hmm.
because the cannon rushing meta was just so poorly developed. Um, and at the time, I looked at him like this isn't impressive,
Yeah.
which I would agree with nowadays. But back then, I probably wasn't good enough to do any of the stuff that he was doing anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
so I said I can get GM by doing what he's doing. And so I decided to make the challenge myself to cannon rush to GM, and I figured I would stream it all because why not?
Yeah, yeah. So you were right in this kind of like plat diamond like hinterland, right? When you started then?
Yeah,
Okay.
I was
How long did
platinum
it
league, but I was probably diamond skill even with macro. I just never played enough games to get to diamond.
makes sense. How long did it take to get to GM? Again, I should know these answers, but I don't.
Uh, so there's actually a forum post that I made on the Day 9 TV forums when I got GM that gives like a timeline for all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But off the top of my head, I got diamond within like a month or two. It's just a matter of playing enough games, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was in diamond for a while, for like a few months before I got masters. I remember back then there was Nios .kr instead of rank for the win,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like points back then, of course, not MMR. But I
Yeah.
remember I was rank 1 for the entire world based by points in Diamond League for like 2 weeks before I finally got the Masters promotion.
Mm.
That was a little bit frustrating.
Yeah.
So I got Masters after a couple months of being in Diamond, like 2 or 3 months. And then about a year after I started streaming, I was very close to GM. I was like right on the cusp of GM. And then my internet like died so badly. Every like 3 seconds in game, I would get a massive lag spike.
Oh
And I
man.
actually plummeted from like about to be GM to Diamond League.
Ugh.
It was really painful. It was a very frustrating time. And then I fixed my internet. I don't actually know what caused it to break, but I fixed it by just relocating my computer closer to the router. That wasn't it didn't break by moving further from the router because I was already in that spot for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I relocated closer to my router and I fixed my internet. And then in like however many games it took just to get the MMR spike, I shot immediately from diamond to mid GM, and then I was mid GM for the rest of my life. Occasionally taking a jaunt up to high GM.
Yeah, makes sense. Awesome.
Because I guess it's where I'm stable at now is high GM. But
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's like it's nice to get kind of. I feel like I was along for the ride now, kind of.
Yeah, so I guess it was like 18 months or something. But I was very close after a year.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. All right. So I'm sure everybody out in the chat wants me to ask about the spreadsheet, right? But we have to talk about the spreadsheet. So give me the backstory on kind of when and how did you decide to pursue that as like such a deliberate kind of practice method? Because it's like your trademark, right? It's what you're known for.
Yeah. So a few months into streaming, it wasn't like there from the very beginning, but it was pretty close. After like 3 or 4 months, I decided to start recording all of my games. And it was with the idea that quite a while down the road, I would have this massive database of thousands of games.
Mm-hmm.
And at the beginning, it was incredibly unimpressive because I had like 20 games recorded and like that. It's just so not interesting. But I turned out to be right. And like a long time down the road, it's impressive to have this database of thousands of games, and everybody talks about it constantly. So that was like my one stroke of genius at the time, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But when I began it, it wasn't as good as it is now, right? I didn't know what I was doing really. I was pretty bad with Microsoft Excel, and I didn't really know what I wanted to be recording. So I only had the basics, and there was like no automation. I maybe had the game number automated. Like I'm not even sure about that much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I did actually. I don't think I had anything automated. I don't think I was linking replays. I didn't even record my opponent's name for quite a while.
Oh wow.
It was just the very bare bone basics of like his league, whether I won. Maybe I recorded whether the can rush was successful.
Mm-hmm.
In his race, like and I think the map. And I did have a note section. That was there from the very beginning. Was the note section.
Oh, interesting. Did you iterate on the notes in the same way that you've kind of iterated on? So one example I'm probably thinking that you didn't have to begin with is like the metagame or not entry, right?
Yeah, so the tags, there was no tags
Mm-hmm.
column back then. I would write like metagames in all caps in the notes section at the start and like a hyphen in the actual notes if
Mm-hmm.
they metagame.
Makes sense. Okay, so along these lines, like what are ways that you use the data if you do? This is one that I've like kind of heard you talk about, but I think maybe not everyone has.
Yeah, so I guess there are three primary uses for it.
Mm-hmm.
One is it just gives me cool stats.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can look up interesting things like my win rate against various builds or whatnot. I can look up how much salty a barcode player is and a non-barcode player. I can graph my win rates by game duration. We
Hmm.
do all kinds of cool stuff like that, which is just like novelty information.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the second use is if I know I'm going to play someone in a tournament, I can look up all of my past games against them,
Mm.
and this is useful.
Yeah,
So
totally.
for like CSL or TESPA, we would know which school we were going to play like a week in
Mm-hmm.
advance. And we wouldn't know necessarily which player I was going to play, but we would at least know the school. And I can
Mm-hmm.
look up who we think I'm going to play or all the possibilities for who I'm going to play. And that can be useful. They don't always play the same way that they have played on ladder
Mm-hmm.
because on ladder they're just doing whatever they feel like doing at the time against cannons, whereas in a tournament they've spent some amount of time preparing for me,
Yeah.
but it can still give me an idea for their tendencies, things to look out for. It's useful. And though I don't ever bring it with me when I go to offline tournaments, I
Mm-hmm.
could put it on like a flash drive, I guess, but I don't. So I don't really benefit from it on that, only online tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
And the third use is if I'm actively trying to improve and figure out how to beat something, it's
Yeah.
very easy for me to look up all of the replays which I played against that thing. So I can just
Mm-hmm.
control F for Nidus and find every game that I get Nidus. And
Oh,
that's useful.
interesting. Huh. Now you're making me feel like, oh shoot, I should have done that. Because I'm not as deliberate as you, but I do try to be, somewhat deliberate in the way that I improve. Huh,
Mm-hmm.
that's a cool angle.
Yeah.
Um,
Also, I guess this isn't a use for the spreadsheet itself, but the fact that I have to take the time to sit there and record the game makes
mhm.
me think about the game after I play it.
Yeah.
And it also has a second advantage of forcing a delay between games,
Hmm.
which is both good for just like a mental like space to calm down, and it means I'm less likely to get rematches against people, which
Ah.
is actually bad for me because I have a nice column here that shows that my win rate is higher in a rematch than it was in the first game if we play two
Huh.
games in a row. Overall rematches, and I don't know if this is actually up to date, but I don't think it's I don't think it's up to the current dates. I think it stops at some point because I haven't
Hmm.
refreshed in a while. But of the data set that this had, I had 361 rematches, which
Hmm.
means I played the same player twice in a row.
Hmm.
And I won 137 of the first game of the pair and 165 of the second game of the pair.
That is so interesting. That's one of those where like I would kill to just like have have someone be like, here's the answer for why, right? Like, but that's like such a hard answer to make,
Yeah.
huh? Oh, that's
I
really interesting.
may actually check when this data cuts off at because I'm sure it does at some point.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, this data only goes to row 4649, which it actually I just hit now. So that actually was from 29th of December is when that data stopped updating.
Okay, gotcha.
So that's actually pretty recent data.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so going back a little bit to what you just said about kind of the tournament play and online cups, collegiate leagues, all this kind of stuff. What do like your friends and family, like maybe people who are not necessarily like in the StarCraft scene, think about the fact that you've competed at that level?
They're very supportive of it. My parents always make sure to watch all the tournament games I play, at the very
Hmm.
least the VODs if they can't watch it live.
Nice.
Um, when I was playing in the Tesla finals, like my entire family was watching that. A couple of them made accounts talking Twitch chat. I was hearing on there. Um, they were all very excited when I won.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's super cool. Okay, this one is a story that I've heard from at least one perspective, but I think it's a really cool story and it's like an interesting part of your like lore as a player. So tell me kind of about the UConn team and how it formed and how you met everybody.
hmm So the second day, I think, of my freshman year at UConn, I ran into H. Jacks in the cafeteria. I ran into, I mean, I was minding my own business getting my food, and he came up to me and was like, "You're wearing a StarCraft shirt." Uh,
Oh man.
so it turns out we actually had already at least met in Twitch chat, but we didn't really know each other. He watched my stream much. I recognized his name as like something I'd seen before, but I didn't know anything about him.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously, we became friends. We were also in the same math class, it turns out, and the same engineering 1000 class, and the same CSC 1729 class, which was like the intro to CSC course.
Mm-hmm.
So we were, yes, HX dropped the class after like immediately after the first midterm, he dropped the math class, but we were still in the other two, and we lived in the same dorm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we met like immediately and became great friends immediately. And then he knew Rookwood, and Rookwood eventually found Turkey Dano, though that wasn't until the second year, maybe even halfway through the second year. I don't remember exactly. For the first while, we had a Diamond Terran player as our fourth.
Sorry, I forgot to turn off the sound effects. Appreciate the follow, but let me mute all of that because I don't want to interrupt Printf again. I thought that I had done that. Whoops. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Continue.
Yeah. I actually entirely forgot about Debaser. We only had him for like one semester, I think. But he was a GM Terran that we very briefly had. I know very little about him.
Mm.
I don't remember why we lost him, if like graduated or switched schools or what. I'd entirely forgotten about him. But yeah, we had a GM Terran, I guess, for a little bit. And then we found Turkey Dano, and we became Team Protoss with HX, Turkey Dano, and me being the three Protoss GMs. Which made us like one of the best schools in the leagues. Then we, of course, had Rookwood as well as our Zerg, token Zerg. If we'd had like another GM or even like a master, we would have been nigh unstoppable because we would have been winning all the 2v2s.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Turkey Dano had to carry Rookwood a bit in those.
Mm.
Made it a bit harder. We got to the semifinals in CSL, I guess 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then we lost to Temple because Temple was very good. They had, at the time, they had Raze and Tesla, which are both very good players.
Yeah.
And then they had, I think, 2 master players or something as their others. And so we barely lost to them. We usually got, I think, top 8 in TESPA.
Mm-hmm.
And like at least top 8 in CSL.
Huh. Nice.
Yeah, so, one of the best schools except for Waterloo, because Waterloo is all 10 players and Yansha.
Yeah, the meta is real, right? I was just thinking back as you're like kind of mentioning some of this history to like I actually remember like watching some of you, well, okay, I say watching. I was listening to it like it was radio while I was at work at my last job. And I became kind of fascinated with your team because of kind of the interesting like strategic angle that you guys had. And I'm pretty sure this was before I watched your stream and before HJax was coaching me, and obviously long before you were coaching me. And so it's kind of interesting. Like I somehow didn't maybe remember his name and associate it with the UConn team. And I think I started watching your stream slightly closer in time to that point. But it's interesting how it's like sort of come full circle, right? To where now I'm learning from half of that team.
Yeah, I mean, HX is just like our vanilla, decent Protoss player who lost most of his games against players that he should be better than. That was HX. He was our pro artist. So I can see why you would attribute him to our team.
Brutal. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm gonna take us out of this dangerous territory before I lose a coach. All right, I want to talk about Minute Micro. So,
Yeah,
so you started this weekly series, right?
yeah.
Sometime in 2018. Do you
It
know
was
exactly
over.
when?
It was about the beginning of the summer.
Okay, okay. What
It
made
was
you?
right before I started my internship, so it would have been the beginning of the summer. Yeah,
Okay.
like June.
What made you decide to do it?
So quite a few years ago, back in HOTS, I made some tutorial videos for cannon rushing because I noticed
Mm-hmm.
that those didn't exist anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I focused on the mechanics of it because mechanics are timeless and
Mm-hmm.
strategy becomes obsolete in like a month.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured mechanics are a much better topic to make a video on because they're
Mm-hmm.
timeless. Like several years down the road, I'm still referencing people to those videos because even though they're somewhat poorly made at that point, they're still the content is still good. You know, the
Mm-hmm.
videos themselves suck. And so more recently, I guess I noticed there's just a general lack in videos on micro
Mm-hmm.
because everyone has this, in my opinion, misguided belief that macro is the only way to improve in StarCraft.
Mm.
And so there's like a whole bunch of guides about macro, but it's much harder to make a mechanics guide on macro. You can't teach someone to just macro better mechanically, right? It's
Right.
very hard to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of can, but it has to be like a personalized thing.
Mm-hmm.
You can have personalized coaching where you help their mechanics, but it's hard to make a video on it.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these macro guides are just on strategy, and those become obsolete quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So people are always pumping those out. But so for some reason, there's none on micro, even though micro is entirely timeless mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
That like occasionally they'll get patched out. Like if I made a video on like cyclone lock-ons right now, saying like
Mm-hmm.
click deliberately like twice on each unit, so that way you get the kills faster. Whereas if you just aim move, they'll only lock on once or something. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if that's good or not. I'd have to actually test it, but this is an example
Mm-hmm.
that could get patched out if they
Mm-hmm.
revert the cyclone again.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly these things are timeless,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the type of video I like to make. And I know I have good micro. That's
Right.
very demonstrable. And so I just felt it was a niche that I could fill. And as far as the minute micro format goes, I learned from all my previous experience with videos that people don't like watching long videos.
Yep.
And I know for myself, if I open a video on something and I see it 15 minutes, I just immediately click away. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
watching that.
Yeah.
Unless it's by someone that I really respect and know is going to make a good video that's 15 minutes long. Most time it's this person sitting there going, yeah, and then I guess there's this, and yeah. So let me wait while this thing builds, and then I can continue the video.
Yeah.
And like, it's this whole bunch of wasteless, useless dead space.
Mm-hmm.
So I figured I would make a highly edited video that is hyper specific on one specific topic of micro.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can't fit that in 1 minute, then either I'm doing a bad job of explaining it, or I need to be more specific in what I'm making the video on.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
And that worked out pretty well. At some point, like it was actually, I guess, fairly early on, like between like episode 6 and 8, I think someone suggested I make a map for it.
Mm.
And at this point, I was, full time at my internship and stuff, and I didn't really have a lot of time to be working on it. And I had a whole bunch of episodes I had to catch up on, so I didn't get around to doing this until making the map. I mean, until
Yeah.
the summer ended, and I had like a couple weeks off before school began. So I took that time to spend a lot of time making the map
Mm-hmm.
because I had to get the infrastructure for the map made, and I had to actually
Yep.
make all the challenges that I missed. And in the meantime, I was still making more episodes.
Yeah.
So I was like, it was rough catching up. But a couple weeks into school, I finally finished that and got to release it. And then that changed the workflow a lot because instead of going to the unit tester for like 2 or 3 hours, just trying to find a good example to use, and then spend a while longer, like, making, just doing tries until I get a clean run and then doing the video on that. Now I could just make the challenge in the editor, which still requires me to spend a while, balancing it and
Mm-hmm.
just finding a good example to use. And A lot of the time, actually, there's something that I think is very straightforward micro, and then I implement it, and every time I do that micro, it makes me do worse than if I just A move.
Mm.
So I have to actually spend time finding the scenarios in which the micro is beneficial,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of annoying. But once I get that all figured out, it's pretty easy, right? I just have a very clean way to know when I've done a good enough run. So quite often, actually, even though I get like, well, I guess before it was even though I passed the run, I still often wouldn't like the take. So, for example, the missile
Mm-hmm.
dodging pickups challenge, I spent a lot of time getting the video for that because even
Mm-hmm.
though it was easy to win with all four Marauders left over,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't look clean enough. Like it didn't demonstrate what I
Uh,
was trying to show well enough.
yep.
So I probably beat that with all Marauders live like 20 or 30 times before I got a take that I liked.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I get the footage, I spent a while editing it. And the lines don't take too long to do. I usually get those in a couple tries.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I trip over myself a lot and like change my mind about what I'm trying to say, and I have to do a lot of takes. And I very frequently will take like 4 different takes for the line and chop them up and then smush them together.
Uh-huh.
So like 3 words from a sentence will be from one take, and another 2 words will be from another take. But in the end, it comes out fairly seamless
Mm-hmm.
because like it's so common for me to say a line and then decide that I didn't like the way I said the last 2 words,
Yep.
and then I'll start a new recording and I'll play it and listen to myself saying it, and then I'll just finish the line in the same like intonation that I was already doing. And
Yeah, yeah.
you can't hear it really when you're listening to it unless you know specifically to look for it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, I mean, maybe I should just redo the entire thing, but then Light will just screw up another word and have to redo the entire take like 17 times.
Right, yeah. Oh man, you're making me feel better because I've hit all of these same scenarios doing the bite-sized StarCraft 2 stuff where like I'll do whatever the thing is. I'm like, no, but it didn't look clean, right? Like that's not videoable, or the exact same thing of like, oh, okay, I liked half of what I said there, but the second take is better and whatnot. And like, and I don't edit them because I don't have time, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, do I take the one with the crappy first half or the one with the crappy second half? And then a lot of them are just like, it devolves into just me swearing at my monitor like halfway through, and then I turn the recording off. Anyway, it's nice to know that that other people run into that, and it's funny to hear like the ways that you've solved it too. Okay, let me stop talking about me and jump into more questions. So okay, you already, I was gonna ask you about kind of the accompanying arcade map and like how you came to that. You answered that. So let's talk about difficulty scaling. This is one that we talked about on a couple of recent coaching streams and like in Twitch chat and stuff. But tell me, for everyone else, how do you kind of decide what's a bronze finish, what's a jam finish?
Right. So I guess the bronze, gold, diamond GM thing is recent.
Mm-hmm.
So before that, I'm actually going to go back to the beginning of the creation of the map. So when I was implementing all the challenges initially, I would, I guess the first few I spent a lot more time on the higher numbers because,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, by that point I was pretty tired of it all because I'd been making a lot of challenges back to back.
Yeah.
But basically the way I do it is I play the challenge, or I guess I'm making the challenge, right? So I come up with a scenario that I want to use to demonstrate it.
Mm-hmm.
And for some of the initial ones, that would be the same scenario as was in the video. So for the prism chasing specifically, that one was taken directly from the video. And so I already had something to go off, and I just copied that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just demanded whatever performance I gave in the video. Some it was less easy to just copy the video, or I decided that I didn't like the way I did it in the video, so I came up with something better.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those, I used the same method that I then used for all the videos after that, which is I find the scenario I want to demonstrate it in. I play the scenario a whole bunch, and I come up with some kind of standard for myself as to like the runs that I feel I played as I would the runs in which I don't make an obvious mistake are what I consider to be having mastered the technique.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what's a good example? With I'll use prism chasing because it's an easy one. Mm-hmm. If you misclick your prism back when you're trying to pick up the immortal, or if you misclick it up when you're trying to unload, if you do that at any point, I think you failed the test, right? You shouldn't pass it at that point.
Mm-hmm. Of
course, the prism chasing I just stole from the video, so actually you can pass that even if you screw it up a few times. You get gold at least. The new GM requirement is a lot stricter on that.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem with this is that most people don't think that the requirement for passing a challenge should be getting an A on it. Because that's essentially what I'm doing here, right? Is I'm saying if you don't make a mistake, you pass. And that's getting an A or an A+.
Yeah.
A lot of people are underachievers and are okay with getting a D and calling that a pass. So there was a lot of controversy when the map was first released about the difficulty of the challenges, and I still defend the way that I do it. I think it's much more useful as a practice map if you have to have a high level achievement for it. But a couple reasonable points were raised about the fact that it can be discouraging to just fail over and over and over again. However, there is one concept that I stick to, which is the videos that I'm making are to demonstrate a technique. This has an implied premise that the technique is useful, and that means that there should be some situation in which you have to be using the technique, and you're screwing up, you aren't using it, or you may not have the APM to do it while doing other things. But that's beside the point. Where in this challenge map, you're doing nothing else. You can just focus on the technique.
Right.
So that means that the challenge should require the technique to be beaten. And unfortunately, some of these techniques are difficult to make a scripted situation where it's useful.
Right.
There are some where it's actually very helpful in a real game, but it's difficult to simulate a situation which is helpful. Which means that the situations that I come up with do provide you the opportunity to use the technique, and you can get benefit from the technique. But in order to make it require the technique, I have to make it a lot harsher, a lot stricter.
Right.
And I also need the technique to be the best way to beat this. So if there's some other way to beat it, then I need to make it harder until that way doesn't work anymore. You need to use the technique. So the damage splitting episode is a good example of this. That is the one where you have adepts trying to kill drones.
Yes, this one has been much maligned.
So I made this one initially. I spent a long time developing this one. It was originally like PvP, and they were Phoenix that lifted up your adepts and stuff. But the problem is that it's very easy if there was just Phoenix to split your adepts in half, and those whole positioning, split their fire perfectly. And I could maybe add a shield battery, so you have to at least focus fire with 2 at a time, but that's still very easy to do if there's nothing to aggro them. So then I figured I need to make something that will aggro their attention, like aggro their attacks if you aren't focus firing with them. But the problem with that is when I added the spine crawler, I switched to Zerg and added a spine, it was still easy to just split them up and shift queue a bunch of attacks with them. So then I needed a situation which you can't just split them up and shift queue attacks. And so adding lings means that if you split them up, they get surrounded by lings and die. So they have to sit in the choke point, which means you can't just split them up and shift queue attacks. And by the time all of this is done, it's a very difficult challenge, it turns out. But it's beatable if you use the technique in the video, and it's not beatable by any other technique, as far as I'm aware.
So it's
to get GM at least.
Yeah, it ends up being a little bit convoluted, but it's like you have to patch for all of these different things, because otherwise you've got, H-jacks salvaging bunkers and beating challenges, right?
Yeah. And so then I guess more recently I made it the gold diamond GM instead of the pass fail. And for all of the old challenges, I had to kind of force this onto it. And a lot of them, there was no way to make it easier. Like, there's no way to just lower the standard. So those are strictly harder now.
Yeah.
Like prison chasing is strictly harder now. Back then, pass is now gold because I can't. There's no way to make that easier. I could maybe reduce the number of roaches and then like make some strict time requirement to be GM, but
Right.
it seemed more natural to just make it harder. Some of them are easier. The first one, Pro Bodyguards, that one is easier now. Gold requires allows you to lose 2 probes to get gold, and Diamond allows you to lose 1, and then GM is what it used to be, which is you aren't allowed to lose anything. So some are easier and some are harder. But from now on, I can design them with gold, diamond, GM in mind. So now GM can be that that same level of difficulty as before, where you aren't allowed to make a mistake, and you can only get GM by using this technique and not in any other method. Right. But I can have some kind of leeway with the others. And I'm still concerned that can lead people into bad habits where they're like, I can't get diamond with the correct method, but I found this other like cheesy technique that beats it with some other way that doesn't actually help me learn. And that lets me get diamond because it's easier. And then they're just forever stuck and they aren't improving from it. But it's kind of also made with the expectation of good faith where people are using the map for the purpose of practicing and improving. And so they're just cheating themselves if they're trying to do it some other way.
Sure, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, there aren't, prize purse tournaments for this, so the reason to use it would be to improve yourself. Okay. So I'm gonna ask you some questions, and I'm gonna skirt around a particular recent news item, and we're gonna circle to it in a minute.
All right.
So, kind of talk me through like your discovery process for some of the tricks. Like, so you said some of it is, you're poking around in like unit tester. Is that the only method? Do you do stuff in custom games? I'm thinking of like recent discoveries about oracles, but we'll get there specifically.
So the beam weapons and minute micro are unrelated. That was not found in the process of making a minute micro. So. Okay. But for minute micro, I already know the technique that I'm trying to demonstrate before I begin, and that was true even back when I was before I made the map. So I know the technique I'm trying to make. I think of some situation in which I think the technique is useful. I implement it, or back in unit tester, I just throw the units together and try to do it. I have much more power now over the challenges, over the video demonstrations now that I'm making my own map. Yeah, especially because recently I've started scripting AIs for things like the Disruptor. Made a simple scripted AI. Yeah, so I make some kind of situation where I think the trick is useful. And I play it out with the trick and without the trick until I get a sense for like how much impact it has in the scenario. And if maybe there's some facet of the scenario that makes it worse. And then I can modify it or go to an entirely new scenario to make it more visible. I try to find the scenario that maximizes the input of the impact of the trick. And sometimes when I'm doing this, I learn more things about the trick that I didn't know before. I definitely get better at explaining it. If I don't spend like an hour or two practicing this technique, even though I can do it, perhaps I can't really explain how to do it as well.
Right. Okay, so
I already know the tricks before I make the episodes.
So now that makes me... This is not in my notes, but this makes me wonder now, though, like, how big is the database in your head of possible tricks that you can show us? Like, I assumed, because, like, with Bite-Sized StarCraft 2, right, I have to be like, okay, crap, what am I going to do next Sunday? Like, how many of these do you have?
So I don't have a whole lot of them planned out. Like, every week, I'm like, what am I going to do for next week? I don't know. I'll figure it out at some point during the week, right? But a lot of that's just because it's hard to find one that's good for a video. There are like thousands of different micro situations, and depending on how specific you want to get, there's like tons of different things you can do in the game. And I mean, I haven't even gotten to countering the opponent's micro yet. Wait until I start imposing that sector of micro, because there's different categories of micro. Right now I'm focusing entirely on like things that you can do if your opponent doesn't counter it, that helps you out. But like the hard part is categorizing them, I think. Because when I'm in a game, I'm just like, well, this is the thing that gets more value for my units, and I just do whatever that happens to be. categorizing them into discrete tricks is really the hard part.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So it's just more a packaging thing than a, because I guess you
Mm-hmm.
have the body of knowledge to work with.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, skirting around the recent Oracle balance change and revert for just another quick second.
All right.
So there are certain little tricks that you cover, right? Research that you publish, this kind of thing, that
Mm-hmm.
can give a pretty significant edge. Like here I'm actually thinking void race, right, in PvP.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so
So
what?
are you still talking about the beam weapon here?
Yeah, still talking about beam weapons. But just skirting around the
All right.
obvious. Um, so what motivated you to kind of be open with these discoveries rather than, because you could sit on this information, abuse it in a tournament, performance, that kind of thing, or
Mm-hmm.
even just on your stream, right? To
Yeah.
like look better, smarter, faster, that kind of thing. So
Smarter.
what's kind of the thought process there?
I appreciate freedom of information.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've always been very open with all of that, like
Mm-hmm.
doing the peak daily on cannons, helping people, like giving replays in which I lose and thoughts on what people can do against cannons, which
Mm-hmm.
I perhaps didn't do an excellent job of there, but I at least did it.
Cool.
And I'm fairly open if anybody asks like what I think the best counter to a cannon rush is,
Mm-hmm.
because I have the opinion that I can still win anyway.
Mm.
And most of the people who are giving advice to anyway, I'm never going to play. But I would like to see the meta like develop as much as they can. Every time the meta develops in any way, I think it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could have sat on this technique and just won games with it,
Right.
but I am, I guess, vain, and I like. I mean, obviously, if I share this like revolutionary technique with everyone, like I'm gonna get a lot of applause
Mm.
for it, and I'm
Uh-huh.
vain enough to enjoy that. But also, it is good advertising for my stream as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I can at least take that as the excuse.
Sure. That makes sense. I mean, you're calling it vanity, you're calling it advertising, but to me, I'm hearing something different, right? I'm hearing kind of an honorable purpose behind it, and I guess ultimately you're also kind of saying that it is a more powerful thing for you to do to share the information than to just use it to win a couple more games or that kind of thing. So that's kind of neat. Have you ever held back any knowledge, any little trick or anything like that, or maybe a certain cannon spot on a given map?
There was one thing I found a long time ago that
Mm-hmm.
you can use in very specific situation to re-wall a pylon to rebuild a pylon in the same spot that it was when it dies
Mm-hmm.
without the opponent making a mistake.
Hmm.
There's a very specific situation that has to rise for this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, for it to happen, I think the cannon rusher has to make a mistake as well.
Mm.
And I was hoping to be able to just do this on stream one day and be
Mm-hmm.
like black magic.
Yeah.
But that never really happened.
Mm.
And it's not something that has any relevance outside of cannon rushing.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's not ever a common thing. So I never bothered to tell anybody about it.
Sure.
I guess that's the closest I can think of.
Okay, makes sense. All right, so now I'll finally address the elephant in the room. I'm curious to get your thoughts on the recent decision by the StarCraft Balancing, which was then, of course, reverted after much public outcry, to change the way beam weapons worked as a result of a Reddit research write-up that you presented.
Yeah. So something went wrong at Blizzard there. Like there was a lapse in communication or something, because I can't imagine anybody who actually knew what was going on looked at
Mm-hmm.
that patch before it went live. Like I
Yeah.
have to assume someone on Battle.net forums posted a
Mm-hmm.
bug report thread
Huh.
detailing this, and the tech guys at Blizzard were like, "Bug report, let's fix it." So they
Mm.
fixed it, and then some upper management thing was like, "All right, let's push all these bug fixes at once," and then it went live, and then they're like,
Yeah.
"Whoops, we screwed up. Revert that. Revert that."
Yeah.
Because like there's no way they intended to let that happen.
I hope you're right. I'm not as convinced, but I'm latching onto this narrative you're selling right now, and I'm hoping that that's the thing.
I mean, I can't imagine they're that incompetent that they would just do that without thinking about it if it weren't something like
Yeah.
this.
I mean, I don't know.
And
For
the
me the
turnaround time on the reversion was
mm,
so fast.
yeah, that's true. That's true. I guess I'm hung up on the wording, right? Of like we didn't intend for it to work this way, but you know, we're gonna change it just basically on that basis alone, right? This was an unintended behavior.
Yeah. So they do. It does appear that they currently intend to change it at some point in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I really don't think they intended to push it with that patch.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay.
Also,
Yeah, go for it.
before we leave this topic, if you're
Sure,
planning
sure.
to, I
Hmm.
have more to say about it.
Yeah, please.
Um, One that personally, I don't think the beam change should be changed at all, or
Mm-hmm.
the beam behavior should be changed at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think it should just be relabeled as a feature.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'll like there's whole bunch of examples you can cite, like in Brood War carriers, the interceptors don't return to
Yep.
them if they're moving.
Yep.
That's been a thing in Brood War forever. Nobody's ever complained about that.
Mm-hmm.
People have asked for that to be added to StarCraft 2.
Yeah.
That exact thing I've seen
Right.
requests for on StarCraft 2.
Mm-hmm.
There are a whole bunch of examples you can make from like Smash Melee or
Yep.
any older competitive game.
Mm-hmm.
There's a whole bunch of bugs that became features.
Sure. Yeah.
And from another angle, the beam behavior is hard to say if it's a bug or not, because really it's happening the way that it's scripted to happen.
Yeah.
The bug here that's abusable is
Mhm.
the retargeting bug, which I actually made a video and complaint about several years ago. But nobody cared because you couldn't kill probes for shield battery with it back then. That is much more deeply ingrained in the engine, and is an actual bug that you can't fix by just modifying something in the editor.
Right.
And so I doubt that they will fix that, but as the actual bug, in my opinion. And they did change that. You wouldn't be able to damage boost void rays, and you wouldn't be able to break through a shield battery with an oracle or any of that other abusive stuff, but it would keep all the oracle DPS that it currently has against Zerglings.
So, okay, to be totally clear on this, then your position would be in favor of that tweak, but not in favor of changing the rest of beam weapons, or do you want all of it left in if you had your way?
I think the beam behavior should definitely be left in, and I think that the retargeting bug should be fixed because it is very annoying outside of beam weapons.
Yeah.
And I think it's a cool mechanic that it has with the interaction with beam weapons. But I think that it's too obtrusive of a bug and too unintuitive of a bug to be good.
Yeah.
The beam weapon can be easily passed off as a feature of just units with a beam.
Yep.
But the fact that attacking the same units that you're already attacking causes your unit to behave differently, that's extremely counterintuitive, and I don't think that's good design.
Okay. Yeah, for me, I feel like I like everything about it except the interaction between the Oracle, probe, and shield battery. Like, and I guess I don't understand it well enough to understand the implications for non-beam weapon units, but I really like the kind of, you're talking about, Brood War mechanical tricks or like Smash or, certain old FPSs and stuff. Like, I really love that kind of stuff too. I think it's really cool. And good for the lore of the game. Like, I like the damage boost on the Void Rays. I think it's like kind of fun.
Yeah, I agree. Like, damage boosting Void Ray is very cool micro, and I have nothing against that. The problem is just the retargeting bug. So to get some context here, I originally complained about it because when you have a Zealot attacking a Marine has 45 health, a Zealot does 16 damage in the form of 2 swipes of 8 damage each. So a Zealot will 3-shot a Marine, because 16 times 8 is 48. Or 16 times 3 is 48. But if your Zealot happens to already be attacking the Marine by an attack move or right click, whatever, if you change the type of attack from like smart command to attack or attack to smart command, then that will reinitiate his attack. It's the retargeting bug. So if you do that, after the first swipe, it cancels the attack.
Mm.
So now it does 16 and 16 and then 8. And that's not enough to kill the Marine. So that pissed me off a lot.
Yeah.
And so it turns out now that I know about it, I guess I can get around this by just right-clicking on the Marine instead of A-clicking on it.
Sure,
because
yeah.
that's still a smart command, so that shouldn't change it.
Mm-hmm.
So I should test that exactly, but it shouldn't cause
Yeah.
it to retard now that I know about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's like, it's just like a bizarre, unintuitive interaction that is frustrating when it happens to you, and I don't think that should be in the game. And if removing damage boosting from Void Rays is a necessary collateral for fixing that bug, I think that's okay.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Cool, yeah. This is interesting stuff. So, okay, we just kind of like, as we were, picking this issue apart from different angles, we kind of did a deep dive on some really like intense mechanical stuff, right? And I was able to mostly keep up with everything that you said, but for me, that's not something where if I was messing around in unit tester, I think I would ever notice, right? So does this kind of thing just come naturally to you? Does your brain just see this stuff, or did you have to work at that?
So for the beam behavior specifically here?
No, I'm just thinking about all of it. Like you see the mechanics and you approach it in such a methodical way. I'm just interested, is that just like who you are and how you are naturally?
Yeah. So I think of everything in terms of the lowest mechanics, and I just see the way that the upper level behavior emerges from it. I'm a huge fan of emergent behavior, and like I just learn the fundamental mechanics and see all the interactions that cause the upper level things to happen. And that's very powerful, I think, because it means that there are a lot of, most people operate off heuristics. Right? They're like, in general, this is how the higher level behavior works.
Yeah. And
occasionally there's something that doesn't fall into the heuristic, but I don't have that problem because it's like, yeah, obviously that's how that works because that's how it behaves.
Right.
And as an example, Fear Dragon recently posted on Twitter, like, if an upgrade finishes while the projectile is in the air, does it deal the extra damage from the upgrade? And I was like, obviously yes, because that's how the game works. And everyone else was like, that's a great question. I have no idea.
Right. Huh. Okay. Interesting. So it sounds then that this is kind of your approach to life in general, right? I mean, we've been talking about this in the scope of StarCraft, but I can't imagine someone who just says what you told me, right, that you wouldn't apply this to other areas of your life, right?
Yeah. This is how I think about everything. Like, for using an academic example, I guess math. I don't memorize formulas. I just know the concepts and I figure it out when I need it. Like in high school, this has always irked me. They give you these like 6 trigonometric formulas or something, and they're all the same formula. You just move things other side of the equal sign. I'm like, why are you giving me 6 things to memorize? Why?
Yeah.
So I memorized the very basic one of like sine squared plus cosine squared equals 1. Or I think that was the one that I memorized. And then I can just manipulate it to get everything else. Like, why are you telling me to memorize 6 things? I don't have that much time to sit here memorizing equations. Like, come on.
That's funny. Okay, last kind of thing on this subject, and I know we're getting pretty close to our time here. So are you kind of as methodical in your life as well? Like, we've talked spreadsheets and stuff for StarCraft. Are you that methodical with everything that you do?
I am a paradox of extreme methodical behavior and like extremely not methodical behavior.
Okay.
So in some ways, I'm struggling to think of good examples here, but like, I can't think of a good example.
Okay,
in some ways, I'm very methodical. In some ways,
I'll give you one for myself, right?
Okay.
So I've got like weird dietary stuff, which is besides the point. But I'm also a software engineer like yourself. I eat the same food every day at the same times. Do you
I
do that?
definitely do not. No,
Okay,
I
okay.
definitely do not do that.
Because like that's a super weird thing, right? Like, and I acknowledge that that's weird. Um, huh. Okay. So
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 like
mostly
at
you're
at the moment, I take the same. I have the same thing for breakfast, and I take the same thing for lunch every day because it's simple and easy to do. And
convenience.
like yeah, and then for supper, like I just whenever I feel like eating, or whenever I feel like I'm going to be hungry by the time I'm done making the food.
Mm-hmm.
I just go make the food, and whatever I'm making for supper varies by day, depending
Sure.
on a whole bunch of different factors, like
Mm-hmm.
how healthy I feel like eating that day, and how much time I feel like how much time and energy I have to spend to cooking, all that kind of stuff.
Uh-huh. Okay. That makes sense.
Sometimes I'll plan the stuff out like several days in advance. I'll be like, okay, I know that I'm going to run out of bagels on Tuesday, and so I need to go grocery shopping Tuesday night, which means that I'm probably not going to have a lot of time and energy to spend making food that night. So I'll just make something quick, which means that probably Monday night I should have something that requires a little bit more effort and is healthier than whatever quick thing I make on Tuesday. I will plan things out like that sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, a lot of the time, whatever I feel like doing.
Yeah, okay. That last little bit of answer is exactly what I was getting at because I have that like in spades, right? And I was curious if you did too, given that you are so methodical with your StarCraft stuff. Okay. Um. So viewer question: a lot of people say cannon rushing is unfair. I want to patch that out of the game, or at least I want the map makers to kind of nerf it out with the way that they design base layouts. What is your take on that?
Um, Can rushing hasn't proved itself to be a dominant strategy at the top level in tournaments, and that's what
Right.
Circus primarily balanced around. So I don't see any reason for it to be a strong consideration. There are certain situations in which a map is actually just broken,
Mm-hmm.
and those actually will be used by pros. And even though they're still not used commonly and don't even have like an incredible win rate by the pros, they do get patched out quickly because
Mm-hmm.
they are broken. The pros just usually don't spend a lot of time practicing it.
Yeah.
And I'm always very critical whenever a pro can rushes
Mm-hmm.
because you screw a lot of things up. Now, that's not to say I don't screw a lot of things up as well. I make a lot of mistakes, a
Mm-hmm.
lot, but I'm also always playing with a week's worth of rust in my defense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Um. Well, okay. Just let's touch on the pro cannoning topic. Like, is it painful for you when you see them do it and you're like, gosh, I like if you would have sat down with me for 3 hours, like I could have made you better at this. Like, does that ever kind of bug you?
Yeah. So there has been at least one pro in the past who's actually gotten coaching from for
Ooh.
PVC specifically. I taught him the 2 gate build.
Uh huh.
He hasn't used it as much as I feel he should because I think that build is ridiculously powerful against
Mm-hmm.
Hatch First, which everyone is going to go Hatch First in his
Mm-hmm.
EVP at the pro level. So I think it's way underutilized. Like
Mm-hmm.
Thermal did very well at Home Square Cup with it, but Thermal wasn't the one I coached.
Mm.
Um, that was a while ago though. We haven't done a session in a while. Uh, yeah, when I see a pro can rush, most of them are pretty bad at. There are a couple who are competent.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but most of them are really bad, and it's a little bit painful.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, like a lot of them do strategic moves that I disagree with.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them simply do things in a very inefficient way
Mm-hmm.
without like any strategic benefit from it. Like they're not doing a different decision than I would make. They're just
Mm.
very inefficient in their execution of it.
Uh-huh.
Like they'll make a wall in a spot that has like 4 pylons when you can make a wall in the exact same spot that has 3 pylons. And I was like, why? What are you doing? You're doing
Right.
it wrong.
Yeah.
Like just look at the map for 10 seconds before you do this. And those are always very frustrating to watch. But at
Yeah.
the same time, it makes me feel good about the fact that I'm better than them at something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I won't. I'm trying not to poke at certain things because you've left this pro unnamed, right? But I'm really curious. Like, you don't say who it is, obviously, because you've been avoiding that. But um, how did this come about? Can you say Korean or non-Korean? Is that safe?
I can say he speaks English.
Okay, I'll take that. How did it come about? Did they hit you up on Twitter, Discord? Like, can you say this? If you can't, it's
Well,
fine.
no, I think he just sent me a friend request on Skype,
Okay.
and I was like, it's a pro, I'll accept that friend request, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then he just asked me there what I charge for coaching, and I was
Gotcha.
like, here's my rate. He was like, that sounds cool, let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I did coaching.
Nice.
We only did like 3 hours, but
Mm-hmm.
it was something.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. I feel like that, just as, somebody who loves the game as much as we both do, that's like a really fun like treat to have happened, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty
Um,
cool. I was excited for it.
yeah, totally. So we're pretty much like at an hour here. I've got a couple more questions. Do you want to end here, or do you want to try to power through it?
I'm good. I'm
Okay,
good for going longer.
awesome. So circling back to the recent patch note stuff, there was a mention in there specifically about making double proxy robo weaker in PvC. Do you have thoughts on one, just kind of the balance of it in general, and then
Mhm.
two, I think more what I'm getting at is the intentionality that you kind of hear behind that, where it's like, Printf and some of these other guys are doing this, and we don't think it should be as good as it is, so we're going to change it.
Yeah, so I don't think it's shown itself be a balance issue at the top level. No one's doing
Mm-hmm.
it. Haas
Mm-hmm.
did it like once against Serral and lost. No, we
Yeah.
did it twice against Serral and lost both games.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe he did, I don't remember.
I can't remember how many games, but yeah, it happened.
And he lost every game that he did it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't actually recall it being done successfully in a pro game in quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't been done unsuccessfully in a while either. I mean, every now and then you'll get someone complaining about it on like All Things Zerg or something.
Yeah.
But in that thread, inevitably you have like a highly upvoted comment of, I beat this every single time, and here's what I do. And then they
Right.
give some crap response that wouldn't work at the high level, but it works for them, and that's great. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's like flagging the lower levels either. I don't
Yeah.
think it's like a big balance problem that needs to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
And at least, so the balance team has a different philosophical approach now than it did when David came around. But
Mm-hmm.
I remember once he said that they prefer to make fewer changes than more changes because it feels bad to have whatever you're doing removed as an option.
Yeah.
And so that philosophical approach would not say to change the double robo because there are a lot of people who enjoy doing it, and it's not a balance problem at any level as far as I'm aware.
Mm-hmm.
But this new balance team perhaps does not share that philosophical approach, and so they want to nerf it. However, they can't want to nerf it that badly because this doesn't affect it at all.
You don't think it affects it at all?
No, like it's so the math on it, of course, is 2 immortals is break even from the robo being cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're getting 2 robos, that's 4 immortals. By the time you have 4 immortals, the game has pretty much been decided.
Okay.
Like if he's going lair for mutas, this is when you need to be pushing to kill him before those mutas come out. So the fact that you're maybe down 50 minerals because you have 2 more immortals queued up, that's not going to be relevant.
Mm-hmm.
If he's going for Roach Ravager, 4 immortals and a Warp Prism is going to do well against like his Ravagers. Like this is the part where you're trading actively, and I don't think you're going to be that short on minerals that having to pay an extra 50 for your 5th and 6th immortal is going to really be a problem.
Okay.
I can't think of any real situation where it's an actual nerf.
Mm-hmm.
It may be a very small buff because you now have an extra 50 minerals to work with while you're getting the robo building, so you're maybe safer against link floods.
Mm-hmm.
So if anything, it's a small buff, I think.
Okay, interesting. So, all right, now let's kind of talk a little bit about kind of the broader kind of intent piece on the part of the balance team, because I agree. I think they may have even explicitly stated at one point, look, like D Kim's out of here. We've got our own ideas. Like his regime is done. We're changing stuff all the time. So if they're out there, if you're out there lurking in Twitch chat right now, balance team, if you watch this on YouTube, like, should we have fears then that they're going to be like, oh, well, Printf said it's not a nerf, we got to nerf it harder, right? Like, because they very much did explicitly state, like, we think that this build in PvZ is too strong and we don't want it to be there. Like, Does that scare you that you're out here doing this, like, somewhat innovative stuff, right? You're at least, doing research on it and working hard, and they're specifically looking at it like, oh, this is abusive, we don't like this, we're going to nerf it.
Yeah, so it's kind of an honor if they're specifically trying to nerf me. Um, so I don't mind it too much, and like I don't actually do double rub so they can nerf that all they want. I do
Sure.
like 3-gate rub mostly.
Mm-hmm.
As long as whatever nerf they make doesn't also nerf the 3-gate robo.
Yeah.
Which at least this one doesn't. I think that. So a while ago, I think like beginning of the fall, or maybe it was over the summer even, a Blizzard representative actually messaged me on Discord and asked if I think that can rushing is imbalanced in PvZ right now. So what I did was I screenshotted my PvZ graph from my spreadsheet and I sent it to him and I was like, this doesn't seem to have jumped at any point with patch 4.0, which I guess was what he was complaining about. Like this has been holding even for several years. I don't think there's a balance problem here. Sure. Now, of course, that's a bit fallacious because I faced metagames instead of patch first. So I perhaps could have known that I think 2-gate is imbalanced. But nobody's doing that anyway, so it's not it's not worth looking at until people really start abusing it. Okay.
That makes sense.
So Blizzard actually has contacted me in the past with to ask if I think can rushing is overpowered.
That's so
and I told them it wasn't. But if they want to nerf it, if they want to directly try to nerf me, I'll take that challenge. A while ago, there's a quote from me saying, if Blizzard nerfs can rushing, I will show them that they didn't nerf it hard enough.
Ooh. I love it. I love it. He's throwing the gauntlet down, folks. Okay. Switching topics. So as far as, practice goes, are you, I know you recently did your research project, like macro versus not, and the barcode thing. But generally speaking, are you just a once a week kind of guy? Is your stream the only practice you're doing?
Yeah, most of the time my stream is the only play that I get. I will occasionally like off race, off stream, which at least keeps me like slightly less rusty because I'm still playing StarCraft, but I don't do that a lot. Occasionally I'll play practice games. Like if I'm actively trying to improve, I'll find someone to do practice games against. Caleb is a common choice for that against Zerg. I'll get him to do like a 12-pull Ravager or whatever I'm trying to figure out how to beat. But I don't do that very often. Usually during the week I just like watch streams instead of playing. So yeah, basically it's just once a week that I play.
And was that true on the trip up to GM as well?
So on the trip up to GM, during the first bit, I would stream more often than just every Saturday. But before I got GM, I did settle into the once-a-week schedule. But at that point, I would spend a lot of time also playing like arcade games that are perhaps relevant, like various micro arcades. Like there was one called RMC, Random Micro Challenges. That was a good one. I played that one a lot. Even just stupid stuff like Abound games or I can't think of good examples of what games I played back then. But yeah, arcade at the very least would keep me less rusty. But I and this is something that Cyril has shown a lot as well. Playing more games isn't necessarily the best way to improve. It's thinking about things that actually helps me at least. And I think most people would benefit from doing this more as well, is just thinking about it. So most of I've never drilled mechanics. I've always just let those passively improve. And I don't think that drilling mechanics, aside from perhaps micro, is useful. Like I think the kind of challenges that I make in minute micro are useful to practice. But in general, I just let my mechanics passively improve as I play. So I have occasionally gone to the unit tester and just micro probes for a while, but most of my improvement comes from just thinking about the strategy of it all. Thinking like, if my opponent's doing this, what should I do against it? And just finding the forks in the build.
Mm-hmm.
I've always enjoyed the strategic portion of StarCraft, and that's always where my primary focus has been, is
Mm-hmm.
finding these strategies that counter other strategies and how to scout it and where the forks in your build should be.
Mm-hmm.
And so all my all my power spikes have been from finding a counter to a specific build and finding the way to scout the build in time to employ the counter.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't need to be playing the game to do that most of the time. Like I said, these are the when I'm actively trying to improve. As I've said a few times, I haven't done it in a while.
Mm-hmm.
But just watching replays and then maybe playing a few custom games is all you need to do that. You don't need to play 5 times a week, I think, to improve.
Nice. That's interesting and also good to hear, right? Because I'm one of these guys who, I love hanging out in Twitch chat. I love watching, pro games. I love watching VODs. I love, digging into a replay and that kind of thing. And a lot of the advice that you hear from, people at the highest levels of the game as well, you got to play thousands of games. You got to just be in there jamming games all the time. So it's really encouraging to hear from, someone with your perspective. Do you think that canoning specifically enables that, or do you think that that's probably true for everyone with every kind of strategic positioning?
I think it's generically true. So last season, okay, so it's true to a certain degree. You do still need to get the quantity of games to collect the data.
Mm-hmm.
I consider laddering to be data collection,
Mm-hmm.
and then once you have the data, you can analyze it.
Right.
So last season, when I was doing the experiments, I had a severe lack of data. So playing more games than I did during that time would have helped a lot because I just lacked data. But I still did all of my improvement from analyzing the data, not from actually playing the games. So once you've collected a bunch of data and you've seen, everything that can happen to you, I don't think that playing additional games aside from, keeping the rust away and making sure that you're up to date on whatever new meme comes out, I don't think that's the important part. I think it's the analysis of it all, the thinking for yourself, having it coalesce in your mind what your plan is and what you're scouting for every time you scout and what you do based on what you scout. I think is the important part there, more so than just grinding more games.
Yeah, it makes sense. That's definitely a weak area of mine, so I feel like there's some truth to what you're saying. Okay, so couple quick ones from chat, and then we'll call it because we're already running pretty long. So Lone Wolf wants to know about Wyvern's rules, right? Never expand. Are there other rules besides not expanding?
Yeah. So Wyvern was a big one of the first viewers of mine, and he was watching since I was in Diamond League. And back then, because my macro was still diamond level, I would transition into macro when it was necessary. When the can rush failed, I would just play from behind with a macro game. And then, of course, as I started getting into Masters League and my OMR started going up a lot because of cannon rushing, my macro didn't necessarily keep pace. And so obviously macroing out of it wasn't as viable an option anymore.
Right.
So I would do the one base all-ins and whatnot. And I would still throw in a Nexus occasionally, right, with a Ninja base or something. But Wyvern started going for the one base rhetoric there, with one base best base and whatnot. So, I knew I couldn't compete mostly with my opponents in macro games anyway at that point. So I figured, why not just embrace it, right?
Sure.
Go one base all the way. And I was already doing one base all ins PBZ. I never was doing the macro transitions to that. I copied Galzi's 4-gate blink all in follow up to it. So yeah, I embraced his one base all in thing. And I also, of course, always have my own rules of don't barcode and don't BM. And then I added Wyvern's rule of don't expand. And I've always just been stubborn. So the never expand, never surrender on the shirt. That The never surrender part, I guess, is also mine. So River and really only can never expand.
Got it. Okay, cool. So the last one that we'll take then is how do you like the new map pool? What do you think?
Haven't looked at it at all.
Okay. Well, fair enough. I haven't either. So I looked at, I think one of them, somebody was like, oh, this map is pretty on Twitter. And I think I looked at that, but that was all.
I look at the map pool when the season goes live. Until it goes live, the maps are still open to being changed.
Yeah.
So I don't see any point in it.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Well, awesome, Printf. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it a lot. It's been really, really cool getting to like, even just kind of get to know you better because, like I said, we've been all business, right? When we do the coaching on Sundays and stuff. So yeah, seems like chat liked it. So yeah, appreciate it and hope you have a great rest of your weekend, man.
Yeah, you too.
All right, take care.